The more diverse we plant, the more secure we can be. Mulberries are a fruit that extends from the tropics to the cold temperate climate and out to the driest of deserts. I've seen mulberries growing on the equator. They don't like to grow there, but they do grow. Get a little bit stressed with that heat and humidity. But I've seen them growing where the saltwater canals freeze cold enough to skate on in Denmark. And then in the driest of deserts, you'll still find mulberry. So it's a massive extension of climate in one species. And they're extremely productive as it produces a berry on a large tree. The leaves are edible, and it can be used as a steamed leaf rolled up, like a dolmadi, eaten as a young leaf, and makes incredibly good animal forage, and especially the white mulberry. It's a very high value forage and grows silk with silkworms, which can be grown for silk or can be grown to feed fish or feed other animals as a protein. But very few people ever see dried mulberries, and yet it dries fine, just like a lot of other dried berries and fruits. But there are cultures in the Middle East that dry mulberries, and you can buy, if you go to a Middle Eastern area of town where Middle Eastern food products are sold, you'll often see packets of dried mulberries as a sweet, and then added into muesli or cereal. It's a sensible extension of yield. There's only a certain time of year when mulberries are fruiting. It's also a deciduous tree that loses its leaves, so it can be put into positions where you can have sun and shade. It will also grow from cuttings, and it will also pleach one mulberry to another. So you can actually grow a trellis with a mulberry. And it partners with grapes. So it's a companion planting, traditional companion planting, to grow grapes on mulberry. And you can shape the mulberry very easily because it's a very hardy tree. And by the time you've added all those possibilities together, you've extended all sorts of potential in yield and function. And it's just two plant elements combined together, without forgetting that it's a forage. So you can feed your stock on mulberry leaves. They'll do very well. It's one of the great forage plants. And that's without talking about processing mulberry as a jam, a vinegar, or a wine, or an additive to other foods. So you have to really think through that this is not what we normally do. We've become reliant on a supermarket shop type attitude of supplying everything, and we have got it stuck in our mind that that's what a garden looks like. That's what a system looks like. A sustainable system doesn't look like a monoculture at all. It's a mixture of elements together, extending the yield over time. So what that does is it's a cyclic opportunity. So you have every cyclic event increases the opportunity for yield. To increase cycling is to increase yield. Cycles in nature are diversion routes away from entropic ends. Now you have the possibility to interrupt their cycle and return it back through a system. Like we did in the little diagram with the reeds. That's just a simple way of saying, right, okay, I can grab that and I can put it back into the system. How many times can you keep that motion going? How many different elements can you increase cycling? When you look at your elements, you're looking at what it takes to extend their energy through a system. How can you reuse their product? If you'd have too many mulberries, they make excellent chicken feed. Chickens love mulberries. So if mulberry fall is dropping into an area where you can't harvest it all, you can turn it into chickens. Turn mulberries into chickens, and that means turning mulberries into eggs or chicken meat and all those feathers and other elements and manures that they're all part of. So giving opportunities for yield, life itself cycles nutrients, thus opportunities for species to occupy time niches. You know that you're in a spatial race with the weeds, really. Your weeds are taking up time niches that you haven't occupied. So you shouldn't look at them as opposition. You should look at them at the opportunities to design niches. Niches that recover fertility, and then niches that still have to be occupied by something that's of value to you. So it's only a time niche and a place niche type of thinking that will give you a complete system that's easy to maintain. It's space, time, opportunities that you're designing. And you can stack the space as well as you can stack the time. You can overlap crops. You can overlap systems so that more than one crop is in the ground at one time, and a winter crop and a summer crop overlap, and the production of fruit trees overlap in one system. So occupying the area with more and more species, so species diversity like a forest, a food forest doesn't produce very much per fruit tree, but produces more over the area in relation to the energy requirement. So if you start looking at, oh, my oranges produce more in a monoculture per tree, you're right, they do. But what does the area overall produce in product? The area production over the inputs. How much input does it require to get the production of that area? And how far is it extended over time? We've become obsessed with the big pumpkin fallacy. The bigger the pumpkin, the better the system. Singular elements fully exposed to sun, fertilizer, water, yes, they will produce more per element. But they're occupying a lot of space and they're requiring a lot of input. I can grow coffee in a food forest at half the production of organic coffee growers in full sun and monoculture plantings. I can grow coffee at 1.5 kilos per bush. In full sun, coffee growers, organic coffee growers, produce 3 kilos a bush. 3 kilos of coffee, they're actually a small tree. They get up to full production. Within about 5 years, they're in full production, and they live 20 to 60 years, depending on the variety. I produce half, 1.5 kilos a bush. Coffee happens to like shade, and over very large areas of coffee production in the world, there is often a singular tree overstory with some value. But I produce half the yield, and I'm quite happy with that because I don't have any inputs. In other words, they're free. It's a free coffee production, where an organic coffee grower in the same region that we can produce coffee for free at half production quantity, they put 600 to 800 grams of fertilizer, organic fertilizer, on every bush every year in the growing season. They have to water in a dry period, in a drought. They have to weed continuously. They're continuously mowing between the rows because they can't use herbicide because they're organic. They're continuously having to whippersnip or clear around the trees. Enormous amounts of labour input, and they get twice the yield per tree. I grow coffee as part of a food forest with multiple productive trees in the overstory, up to 50 different varieties in the overstory. In a small area, maybe 10 varieties in an extended large area in the overstory. They're all productive trees as well. A byproduct of that food forest is free coffee in the understory. But I never have to weed, there's no weeding. So that's the main labour gone. There's no watering, because there's no water stress in the understory. And there's no need for fertilising. They grow perfectly well without any fertiliser. So why would I put any more inputs when I'm getting half the yield for free? I know which energy audit comes out best. It's the one that doesn't need any inputs. I do have to pick. You've got to pick to get the product off the tree, but that's about it. Part of food forest maintenance is cutting organic matter in surplus and dropping it to the ground, what we call chop and drop. You're speeding up the cycles of organic matter return to the soil, and you're making certain light available to some species. You're opening the system a little tiny bit. It's a very minimum maintenance system. So every 2 or 3 years, you might chop the top off some of the taller coffee. But what also happens is, and this is a longer term benefit, is the coffee bushes in that situation, the small trees, live to their full potential lifespan. Where in full sun, because they're forced, even organically, they're forced into production function. They're forced into producing more than they would naturally. They're forced with fertilizer and water, and they have to be weed maintained. Their lifespan's shortened. They very rarely get past 20 years. And you get that with all elements. As you force the function of an element, you usually shorten its lifespan. You bring its production up, but you shorten its lifespan. And your energy audit is less positive. So as you stop forcing function and you design with permitted functions, elements fit in to systems in a natural sort of form, and they extend out their production over time. So there's an added long-term benefit, and that's part of the stability of a system. So all you're doing is you're just doing very slight maintenance to keep the system functioning as a natural system with an unnatural assembly of elements. Your elements that you find in your permaculture system are not an assembly that would naturally occur in any one location. But that's actually standard of our production systems. It's just that in permaculture systems, we've extended it further. We've taken it to a larger, diverse, stable system. So what we have to do is identify niches, because niches that are available allow us the resources and the dispersal of yield. If we can identify the types of niches, so it can be a niche in space, which can be a territory or a nest site. A niche in time, which is a cyclic opportunity. And a niche in space and time, which are schedules. So if you've got the right nesting niche, you could have a nest site that allows your poultry to go broody easily. And you're going to see the result, because you're going to get birds that actually want to sit on eggs. If you don't have that niche set up, a lot of poultry won't actually start to rear eggs. They won't go broody. You haven't created that opportunity for them. There are often niches, space niches, that demonstrate themselves to you. There's some opportunity that happens. You see it, you think, oh, that's a possibility, right? I can use that space. I can see that's indicating for me that is an opportunity there, because then you get that opportunity and to cycle that event. There's that space. There's that nest site. Here's an opportunity for these animals to breed on. So that becomes then that cycle. And then you've got to create that, extend that opportunity. So you've got to create a space now for new animals, new baby animals. You've got to extend them out around the system. So this is an opportunity in time. And then you get niches in space and time. And this schedules an event. So you've got schedules. Wow, we've got an empty system. We've got to pioneer it with fast carbon pathway type plants that will stack organic matter on the soil quickly. And then we can move up through pioneer plants in succession over a schedule of time and build a stable system like a food forest. And the faster we speed up those time niches, the faster we occupy those, the more we occupy those space niches, the more we take up that schedule towards establishment. We can speed it up. And then we can, once we get successful at that, we can say, okay, we can repeat that, and we can see if we can make it easier to achieve. It's actually easier to overstack the space and overstack the time niches. Oversupply your system to be sure that you've got the schedule event that you were after. That was what you wanted. You wanted security. It's much easier to put more species in, so there's absolutely no room for any other opportunists to take up positions. Make sure that the return of resources to the establishing system are oversupplied. It's hard to oversupply a system into establishment. It's hard. It really doesn't often go into chaos that way. You might find that some elements don't work. Okay, that's something you record. You say that we didn't need to put that much in, but I didn't know, so I tried it. Now I know which elements work best in this area. I can now schedule it to be more efficient. But initially, you may as well put in as much diversity of fast, pioneering, successional elements to get quicker to climax. But once you have that experience, you say, okay, now I know what functions best. Now I can make a selection. I didn't have the reference material before, but now I have the reference material. We can do it quicker. We can have a more efficient schedule. And with that, then you can move on very quickly and help other people get going. But until you start to think this way, it's very hard to apply methods of design because you don't know what you're actually after. You don't realise that you've got to do all these things to make it work really well for you. This is what makes a system very sustainable.